Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends. These are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, I am super excited about my guest today. I'm always excited about my guests because they are just always amazing people. But for my audience, he was the creative director and co-founder of an award-winning New York ad agency. His successful ad campaigns were consistently featured in the national press, and the New York Ad Club. And the New York Ad Club selected him as one of New York's best. He was honored at the White House for his agency effective public service work. As a result, he's gotten invited to speak at venues, including the World Business Academy and the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. But here's what I think is so interesting about his journey. I think this is the fun part that I really, really like. What makes his success interesting is that his first college advertising instructor flunked him and told him he'd never succeed in business. Wow. And when he began working, he got fired and then fired again and then again and then again. But four times in 8 years. And it was this low point that became the turning point for his career. So you guys are going to get to hear from him. I am super excited to chat with him. But before we do that, I do need to give a shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, promotion, Walt Mills is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your need. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Production. If you are in need of turnkey special events, Production Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right, I'm super excited. Welcome my friend John to the show. We're like new friends, John. I got to just meet you today, so I'm super excited about this. But he's an award-winning advertising executive and marketing expert. He says he spent 7 years of his career getting fired and then the next 25 years getting famous, which I think this is my favorite part. Gives us hope, right, John? Despite his rough career start, he eventually co-founded a Madison Ave Agency that in 3 years became one of the most awarded agencies in the country. And then John was selected as one of Madison Avenue's 12 best by the New York Ad Club. What's fun is that he now enjoys helping other business owners around the U.S. via his Follis Marketing Therapy. So I am super excited to chat with you. Welcome to the show. We're excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Fun to be here.
Awesome. Well, like I said, this is our first time meeting, which I always think is fun because, usually I get to meet my people before they come on so I can kind of get a feel for who they are. But sometimes it's just fun when I get somebody on here and it's like, I haven't met them yet. I just have to go in and kind of research them and learn who they are. So I'm excited about this opportunity to get to chat with you. So what I want to do, I kind of want to talk about this marketing therapy that you got. Tell us, you don't have to give us everything because obviously we don't want to do that here, but I want you to tell us a little bit about what this is that you're doing now because you've got this amazing experience and you're transferring this into something here where you're helping your clients now. So maybe give us a little bit of a tidbit on this, what this is.
Yeah, I should tell you, Jennifer, that I kind of go back and forth with this. I started marketing therapy back in 2004. When voice over IP and Skype was a very new thing. So I was probably a little bit ahead of the curve in that I was doing kind of what you and I are doing. It was just strictly audio back then. But that's when I started it. And I'm really not that active right now because I really don't need to be. I'm at the point in my life and career that I always hope to be at one day, or I could just kind of do fun things, do whatever I want to do and spend time talking to people like you, which for me is just a lot of fun. I've been doing quite a number of these podcasts, and I'd like to think that after all that time and experience working in the ad business, that maybe working for big companies and then on my own with my own business, that I have at least a little bit of wisdom to share. So that's what I really enjoy spending my time doing right now. So I'm really not, if someone begs me to work with them, consulting, I would consider it, but I'm not so active. But to answer your question, marketing therapy was basically just a way that I branded online consulting. The last thing I wanted to call myself was a marketing consultant. But, prior to that, I was calling myself an ad guy. And whenever I was at networking events and they said, what do you do? And I said, well, I run my own ad agency. The people that I was interfacing with at the time were small business owners, and the A word scared them, because that meant I can't help them because they don't have enough money to spend on advertising. Again, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that would be kind of the end of the conversation after I introduced myself as an ad guy. And I was doing my own business development, so I wanted to keep them talking to me. So I realized I had to reevaluate my business at the time. And what really sparked it, Jennifer, was a unexpected phone call I got from a woman who was referred to me and got me on the phone and said, I really need your help. I'm struggling she was an entrepreneur, solopreneur. And she said, I really need your advice and I'll pay you for it. And at the time, I wasn't doing consulting simply because I didn't think that was a good business model. My business model was retainers and project work that wasn't trading my hours, my time for money. I didn't think trading my hourly time was a good business model. So I wasn't doing that. But I couldn't get the woman off the phone. I politely tried to get her off, explain to her that I don't do consulting, but the more I tried to get rid of her, the more she insisted. And I think part of it was she was an audience member of a presentation I had given. So she had the opportunity to hear me do a show and tell. And I think that kind of sold her that I was the guy that could help her based on what I shared. But after about 20 minutes not getting her off the phone, I finally, a voice in my head said, just shut up and come up with a dollar amount that she could at least reject, right? So that was the start. So the point is, the end of the story is I came up with a dollar amount that I thought she would reject. And she said, okay. And I said, oh, and I get paid up front. And she said, okay. And she came to my apartment. She sat on my couch. I pulled out my legal pad. I started taking notes. And for about 55 minutes, I couldn't get her to stop talking. And I finally had to interrupt her and saying, our time is almost up. We have to stop now. And I felt like a freaking therapist. And at the end of it, she said, I can't believe, she said, I've been talking for 20 minutes, right? I said, no, Eileen, you've been talking for almost an hour, and I'll give you another 10 minutes, but I can't give you more than that because I want to give you some feedback here. You're paying me. Let me give you some advice. So I extended it a little bit, but at the end of it, she said, we have to meet again. And so as she was taking the elevator down from my penthouse apartment on Park Avenue in New York, the wheels in my head started turning and saying, I wonder if I could create a business model around this. And if so, how do I brand it? And it was really the first time in my career that I ever had to really consider branding for myself. And I said, all I knew was I didn't want to call myself a marketing consultant, but it was, it didn't take a rocket scientist to think, marketing, and I felt like a therapist, marketing therapy. So then I immediately started switching gears and put on my art director hat and started designing the logo and creating the website and do all that stuff. So that was a lot of fun. I found that, it enabled me to speak with people around the country that, like this, where, we never met before. We never had any previous experience, but because they were impressed by my testimonials or the work that they saw online, they felt that there was a point in trying to engage me. And what often started as just an initial 1 or 2 hour conversation, in many cases, extended to multiple months and sometimes years of working with clients.
Yeah, this is great. Well, and it's funny because you saw me smiling a little bit because I work with entrepreneurs too, a little bit different, obviously different than what you're doing, but it's funny because I often say that when I'm working with my clients, it is therapy. There's a lot of that in it. And sometimes they just I feel like they want to tell you their stuff, and then you have to pause for a minute and say, okay, are you ready for some feedback now? Because that's why and you almost feel guilty because they're paying you, right? They're paying you for your knowledge and your wisdom and the things that you know. And clearly you've got, talent behind you. So I can see why they'd want to do this, but I can relate to what you were saying on that when you're saying you're talking, do you want some feedback? Because I'm like waiting for that. I'm like, I got to give you something. You're paying me. I want to give you something when you're done. So I think this is so impressive. And I think that, the thing that's interesting to me is when I looked at a lot of your stuff and I was going back to all this. I mean, you've just done so many impressive things that, this career that you've had, but this part where you say, you were fired 4 times and then you had this college professor or what, tell that you weren't going to do anything. Tell us a little bit about that, because obviously you pushed past that and went on to create and do some amazing things.
Yeah, I nearly ended up quitting the business before I even started, because this happened in my junior year of college. And it's kind of funny because for 2 years I was majoring in undecided. I knew I was always creatively talented and artistic because my mom was an art teacher. So I was very talented creatively, but I never could figure out that my talent could be that creative talent could be part of a career. My dad was a business guy, so I assumed I needed to go into some kind of business. So it never occurred to me that advertising would be an option until in my sophomore year, I was in a graphic design class, probably the only graphic design class taught at this liberal arts college. And about halfway through the course, the instructor pulled me aside and said, let me give you some advice, John. You're super talented. Have you thought about what you want to do in your career? Because I really think you ought to pursue something in visual arts or communication or something. And the school that you're currently in is not the school you should be at. You should really get into a school that's got more options for you to really explore and develop your creative talent. So that was one side of the coin, getting great advice from an instructor. And I did take her advice. I transferred to Syracuse University, which has one of the best advertising and communication schools in the country. But the other side of that coin was the first course I took at Syracuse, the exact opposite experience happened. About halfway through the course, the instructor pulls me aside and says, "You have no clue." He says, "You have no clue, and let me give you some advice. You could continue taking the course and take the grade that I'm going to give you, but I can't tell you what the grade is going to be, but I can tell you you're not going to be happy about it. So I'm going to give you an option. You can take the bad grade I'm going to give you if you continue in the class, or you could just drop the class." And so that, to me, that wasn't much of a choice. I'm not someone who gives up. And as I said, "Can I think about it?" He said, "Yeah, you got 24 hours. Let me know." And as I was walking out the door on the way out, he says, "And one more piece of advice, kid, do not go into advertising."
Wow.
So that's not what you want to hear when you're more than halfway through your college. You're paying a lot of money for at a school like Syracuse, and you've just decided that advertising is your major, and the first advertising course you take, your instructor tells you suck and shouldn't pursue it. Now, had it not been for the fact that Syracuse has a great program and multiple instructors teaching similar courses, I would not have been able to take the same course with a different instructor. Mm. My feeling and hope was that it was less about my talent than it was about the fact that this guy was an asshole.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. And the only way I could test that theory was to take the same course with a different instructor. I ended up with an A- or something.
It's amazing. It makes me, it's funny that you say that, because it's kind of like, I feel like, and it's completely different story, but I always say, like if you don't get the answer that you want from somebody, ask somebody else. And it's so interesting to me how so many people will do situations like that, where they have that negative feedback from one person and then they just stop, right? Like they just shut down and they don't go on to do something else. And in your case, you were like, okay, I'm just going to take the course from another instructor because I have the opportunity to do it. And here we are now.
Yeah, and now it sounds like an easy thing
Right.
that we're talking about, looking back on it. But I have to tell you this. Syracuse had a great program, and one of the reasons it was so good is that they had a lot of instructors who were really professionals in the business who would actually come up from New York City, believe it or not. Why they would ever do that, I don't know. It's about a 5-hour drive and maybe an hour and a half air flight. But why they would do that on a weekly basis, I have no idea. But this guy was a New York advertising guy, and we all knew that. And when you're an advertising student and you have someone who's in the business working on Madison Avenue, he is a rock star. He is God to you. So it wasn't an easy pill for me to swallow, for me to say, oh, I'll just take it with another instructor. I really had to think long and hard about how I deal with this. And there was a part of me thinking that maybe he's right. And what do I do now? I just didn't have a plan B.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. And I can see that, which I think kind of leads me into what I want to talk to you about is like, tell us some of the work you did, because being this kind of an agency working on Madison Avenue, this is a huge deal. And for us down here, it's like when you talk about this, I mean, I'm looking at this and looking at your work, but for our audience, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you worked on in your agency.
So, first 10 years, I worked for big agencies on big accounts and got nothing produced and got fired 4 times. Then I started freelancing, and it was really after I decided to do that freelancing and get whatever work I could get, is really when I started getting involved in some exciting campaigns. And the first one happened when I was freelancing and bumped into a couple of guys that asked me to help them out. They said, we just started a relationship with a young designer, fashion/shoe designer. No one knows who he is. His name is Kenneth Cole, and he wants some ads. This was in 1986. So I'm dating myself, but Kenneth Cole was a 24-year-old guy just starting a business, and he was trying to get his name out there. And the good thing about working with Kenneth is that, unlike many clients who are super conservative, who are afraid of doing anything that's going to ruffle feathers, Kenneth was just the total opposite. He wanted to do something that ruffled feathers and got attention. He was looking for, and that was right up my alley. So I worked on that campaign with these 2 other guys freelancing for about 2 years. And those ads created a real buzz in New York City, and I think around the country, and really put Kenneth Cole on the map, and ended up helping him become the international icon, fashion icon that he ended up becoming. At the time, he had 3 stores. And I think after the 2 or 3 years of working with him, he had 103 stores around the U.S.
Wow.
So that was the first campaign. I don't even know. I'm not a fashionista, so I don't even know if he's still a brand name or not. Do you know the name Kenneth Cole?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was like the first thing that I worked on that had any kind of attention. And because people were wondering who's doing these ads, because it wasn't an ad agency, it was just 3 guys who were in their 20s. And we were running full page ads in New York Magazine, so people were seeing them. It really greased the wheels for me to get more gigs at some of the top agencies in New York, which is great, and ended up attracting a guy who turned out to be my business partner. So the second campaign that got any kind of attention was really the first campaign that he and I pitched together. The company, the business, I don't even think exists anymore, but it was for a company that made jam, all-fruit jam. And this was in 1988. So what was interesting about this company is that it was unlike every other, unlike Smucker's. You know Smucker's, right?
Right. Okay. Yes.
So Smucker's is probably number 1 in the category. And this jam company, unlike Smucker's, introduced the first all-fruit jam.
Okay.
No, you'll appreciate this. You have a nutritionist background, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll appreciate this. And this was in 1988. This, prior to our working on it, this was only sold in health food stores. So the general public knew nothing about this product. And he was trying to get it distribution out of health food stores into the mass market. But he knew that his big competitor was going to be Smucker's. The difference with his product, it was actually healthy because there was no refined sugar, no corn syrup, just 100% fruit and fruit juice, nothing else. So that was the story that we had to tell. So we went directly at Smucker's, basically saying just because it's called Smucker's, it's Smucker's tagline is with a name like Smucker's, it has to be good. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they've been using that tagline since 1947.
Wow.
Okay. So we basically took their tagline on TV and dismantled it, saying, with a name like Smucker's, it doesn't have to be good, and it's not good. And our tagline was Sorrel Ridge with 100% fruit, it has to be better.
I love it. That's great.
So we thought we were going to get our asses sued for doing that because you could get sued for anything, even if you're telling the truth. They could sue you just to tie you up in the courts. But that campaign was so successful, it just sales went up 90% the first year. The first month, sales went up 90%. This was in '88. His initial investment was about $350,000 in media. And as soon as he saw the results after the first month, he scrounged up another $500,000 and put it back right into the media because there was such a direct result to what he was spending and what he was getting back. And it ended up getting pressed in all the major news outlets and became a Harvard business case study taught at Harvard Business School because it was so successful. So, again, people may not know the product, but for us, it put us on the map. We were written up in Adweek and Ad Age and all the major media things. So that was for us exciting. But I'll say the other campaign that ended up getting me invited to the White House, which I couldn't
tell us about that.
I couldn't believe when you get a letter in the mail and the return address is the White House, you don't take it seriously.
Right.
You say someone is very creative about trying to get my attention. Good for them. They got my attention. Now let's see who this asshole is.
Right.
We did some work for child abuse prevention and developed a relationship with the National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse that was had a deal with the NBA, National Basketball Association, to do some national TV spots. The NBA was giving millions of dollars of their TV time. At the time, I think they were donating about $5 million worth of TV time, which was a lot. During their playoffs of that year. And the child abuse organization needed an agency to do some national TV spots. So I had about 2 weeks to come up with a campaign for child abuse prevention. I refused to do the campaign if the NBA told us that we had to do spots just having their basketball players with a little kid on their knee reading a script from a teleprompter, we wouldn't have taken the assignment. But we knew it was an opportunity to showcase our work at the same time helping to address a very serious issue that we felt we were happy to get involved in. And I created a campaign that really got a lot of attention because it was very attention getting, and apparently somehow got on the radar screen of the White House. I still don't know for sure. It could have been the president, for all I know. Maybe it was the basketball. This was George Bush. This was in 1991.
Okay.
But all I know is that I got a White House saying, we would love to have your presence at a White House reception for the work that you did. Please respond. And a month later, I was rubbing shoulders with the First Lady, and a couple dozen other people from around the U.S. who were involved in various nonprofit projects.
Yeah, I love
And
this.
so that, it's kind of funny. I was playing tennis with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling him this story. And, most of my work, most of the things I've done, most people haven't seen. But I told them about these spots. And I said, well, unless you were watching basketball in 1991, you wouldn't know these spots. And he said, well, I was watching basketball in 1991. I described the spot, one of the spots. He said, I remember that spot. So it was kind of fun to have. He's probably one of the few people now who can say they actually remember some of the work. But, it's just very satisfying, again, as much as I love doing great work for the clients that we worked with, it's even more satisfying to know that you're working for a cause that can really help solve a problem,
Right. Well, and I think too, listening to everything that you've done, and I think this goes back now, you're in a great place where, early on when I asked you what you were doing and you said you're going around and doing all these podcasts now and talking to people, I think you're in a great place now where you can share, this journey that you've gone through and what you've done and created and kind of get that out there and help inspire other people. And that's a lot of what I try to do on this show is really, when I find guests to come on here, it's talking about your story and what you've done and accomplished and how you've used that, for causes, things like that, or to come on and maybe offer some advice to somebody who maybe they're in your place right now where they're, thinking, hey, I want to do this. And I've got that college professor that's telling me you need to find another hobby or another subject to do. But I do want to also commend you for sticking through that. I mean, being fired 4 times and saying, you know what, I'm not going to give up on this because you've done some incredible work and your persistence and tenacity has definitely come through and put you in some great places. So congratulations on all of that. I think it's incredible. What I want to know from you, because I think that this is some of my favorite parts of this show is when I get in deep and really ask these fun questions. I want to know what you've learned through all this journey. What's your takeaway on this?
Well, I guess the takeaway is that in order to be successful at whatever it is you want to succeed at, you have to make a decision that you're going to deal with whatever obstacle comes across your path. You're either going to go over it, through it, or around it, but you're going to have to deal with that obstacle. And there were many times in my career, especially after getting fired that 3rd and 4th time, where it does require, it's a test, really. It's ultimately a test to say, how serious do you want it? And for some people, they don't want it enough and they'll use that as a sign. I think the hardest thing to know is, when do you know that that's a sign that you should do something different?
Sure.
And when do you know it's just a test to see if you're strong enough to continue going? And for different people, there might be different answers. I think what allowed me to continue going, Jennifer, was knowing how political it was at all those big agencies I got fired from, how much bullshit was going on. For me to say that I think it's less about my talent than it is about this political bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was just going to ask you. How did you know to stay in that? Because you're right. Because I think sometimes, like you said earlier, when you were talking about this professor coming in, these big wigs coming in, and you're going, these are people that I respect or people that we look up to, and they're giving me this feedback, and I'm kind of doubting myself and saying, should I stay in this? You got this passion and this drive that you want to do it. And you got something there, right? But you got this person that you respect in this position going, don't do that, right? And so I think this is an interesting take, and I think, sometimes it does take some of that digging and really, I always kind of say if something's coming to you, this is kind of my take on things like this, because I've had things that come up and I'd be like, these are fleeting things. I joke even about doing podcasts, and people that have been following me in my show for many, many years, or however long I've been doing this, have heard me say this over and over. I took public speaking in college, and swore that I would never get up in front of people and talk, like, ever. I was so freaking shy. Like, I was like, no, it's not going to happen. But what's interesting is, as a kid, I loved creating things like getting people, organizing people and making productions and kind of organizing groups and like getting people to do things. And then ironically enough, I go into this career that I was in for 22 years. I was in the network marketing space. I was actually with Mary Kay for a very long time, was a director in that company. And I slowly had to get up and start getting in front of people and doing presentations and talking and training. Right. And so I think it's so interesting because sometimes we don't really know, right? And we have to do a little bit of exploring. We know there's something that we're good at, but we don't know at the same time. And we have to do a little bit of exploring. And I think that some people, they get lost in that. They don't know, and that's why when I said that to you, when you brought up that was going to be my question, is how did you know that was your, like you needed to stay at that and that was your thing?
Well, I don't think you ever totally know.
That's good.
You can't. You can't, when you're in the middle of a situation, you can't be 100% sure of anything. You don't really know. And that's why I'm grateful for all the people who were in my life during that time that I would lean into and share my story with and get some perspective on. And I feel very fortunate that at the time I had a very supportive father who was a very big part of my life. And even though he couldn't tell me which path to take, he just was a very supportive influence in my life. And, a lot of people don't have that.
Right.
So, especially coming from a parent. But in addition to that, I had other friends and associates. And I remember I even, reached out to some people. Coaching was a pretty new thing back then. But even back then, I reached out to a couple of people who acted in kind of a coaching role for me. So that always helped. But I always try to focus on the positive also. Even though I got fired from those agencies, the way I try to look at it was, well, I also got hired at those agencies.
Right.
And I also realized that 2 of the 4 times I got fired, the guy who hired me at both of those agencies left the agency within a month after bringing me in. And it became pretty apparent to me that once he was no longer around, that's when things became really difficult for me.
Sure.
And I think that's true in any industry. Right. When you don't have someone, especially in New York City, I don't think there's a city in the U.S. that's a more competitive city than New York City, especially in the ad business. There's a lot of big egos.
Sure.
And everyone, it's, when I mentioned I worked on Madison Avenue, everyone says, oh, Mad Men, like Mad Men. And I said, no,
right.
like Survivor.
Survivor.
More like Survivor.
Yeah,
in fact, I just sent you a video a while ago. I just made a video about that, how for me, my career was like Survivor. But
yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay. I didn't know that.
I got it. Yeah. Yeah. I did look at it. It's good. Yeah. No, and I think that's funny that you say that, Survivor.
Yeah. So, that's a big part of it. And I was, when I was working for those big agencies, I was aware of how much what I call the tribal ecosystem affected my success or not at a big agency. So I was aware of that. I just didn't know how to maneuver and navigate my way through it. And it's just Sure. It's really hard. I don't care how good you are at politics. When you don't have someone on your side in that corporate environment, you're going to have a tough time. And I realize that.
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I haven't had to be in that, but I do know people that are in, and I hear the word politics and companies and I just cringe. I'm like, I'm so thankful that I've been fortunate enough to kind of stay out of that, but I can certainly understand, and again, I think it says a lot about you and your persistence and tenacity to keep pushing, having had pushed through that to do some amazing work coming out of that. So I think it's great for other people to hear this, because so many people give up so quickly when things don't go their way. And I don't know. I don't like to say that I always know how somebody feels, but I'd like to say that I'm kind of a fighter like you, and that I kind of keep doing the same thing, keep pushing until I get what I want and make it work. So congratulations to you and all your work and what you're doing. Any like last minute, you said some good stuff earlier when I asked you what you learned, but any maybe additional last minute advice you'd give to somebody maybe that's at that breakthrough moment? Maybe they're starting something new, or they're going into this field and, they're wanting to create something.
I would just say try to gain as much wisdom as you can. I think that's what's great about your show and other podcasts like it, that right now there's no excuse for not getting inspired and getting motivated, because, there's an inspirational, motivational podcast at your fingertips. Back in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't the case. Maybe you could go, to the bookstore and pick up a book and get inspiration. But now it's as easy as typing in a website address.
Right.
And so, I think it's great you doing what you're doing, because I think everyone, regardless of their profession, runs into challenges and needs to hear things that keep them motivated, inspired to keep going. So that's what I would encourage people to do. Sometimes that's all it takes is listening to a good podcast, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just talking to a client today, and that was one of the assignments. It wasn't necessarily a podcast, but I said, one of the things that I believe, that we are our thoughts. If we want to know, what we're thinking, we can just look at our results and see what's happening, because we do exactly what we're thinking. And so whatever we're taking in every day is important. And so I was talking to a client this morning, and one of the things I told her, I said, 10 minutes a day, find some kind of positive. I don't care what it is. If you sit down and read for 10 minutes, you find a video, but something to put into your headspace, and think of it like vitamins. I'm more of let's prevent than fix. We can't come in and say, oh, I'm going to listen to something great now that I'm in the dumps and I'm thinking of quitting. No, we got to prevent. So the idea is, how do we fill our cup every single day and add inspiration to keep us moving forward,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great mantra to have is, don't wait until you're in a tough spot. Keep, because listen, there's no shortage of negative news.
No, I know.
No shortage of things that'll bum you out. So you really have to counteract that on a regular basis, like vitamins. I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I have to stay out of the news. I'm telling you, let me just go get into my positive and stay in my bubble. I'm okay with it. It's why we do what we do here. I love good stories. I love seeing you guys do amazing things. I love sharing y'all stories. I always feel like, you said something earlier about being positive about the things that happen to you, because I'm like you in that I always feel like even in adversity and negative situation, there's always something to take away from that. It's just our perspective. It's how we're looking at it. So there really are no bad takes on anything. It's just to what extent, like to what extent are we learning, and to what extent is it bad? Because the lesson in that moment may be, don't do that again, but there's still a lesson there. You know what I mean? Right. So good stuff. John, so if our listeners wanted to get in contact with you, or just really like look at look at some of your work, see what you've done, just follow up with you, where do we want to send them?
Well, I do have a website that has all my stuff on it, and that's my last name, Follis, Follis, Inc., INC.
Okay.
So they can go there, and if they pop my name into Google or YouTube, they'll see a bunch of content as well.
Yeah, they'll find you. We'll make it easy. When this goes out, I'll get a website in there. But yes, he's easy to find, because I Googled you. I had all your stuff. I was like, let me dig in here. I got to know all the notes on this guy. So you've done some amazing things. And again, I want to say congratulations. I want to tell you thank you for coming on here and sharing your story and just kind of, inspiring our people. It's a good thing. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and keep up the good work. I think your show is great.
Thank you. Of course, we do want to say to our listeners, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you give us a rating on both iTunes, Facebook. We can't do this without you. Hit that subscribe button. And then I want to leave you guys with a parting thought. And John, I say the same parting thought every week, because I think it's important. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, and be kind to one another. We'll see you next time.